everyone, we haven't done it this season, but the shirt, yeah. Honestly, I've got no excuse. The shirt, never put it on the floor, yeah? Far too valuable. Far too valuable. Thousands of, hundreds of thousands of people would die to be in your position. What, you got something you want to communicate to the team? You want to communicate something? You're a big boy. No, you're a big boy. You want to take it?
Can we finish that task?
No, you're moaning about everything.
What have I moaned about today?
Where's the character? Where's the personality in moments when it's tough? It's about over my dead body. That's what it takes.
Inside story of Burnley back in the Premier League last season, available on Sky Sports Plus. Mission to Burnley. Watch it exclusively now. Joey, Gary and Aaron here in the studio with us today. Now, Aaron, we're going to chat to you a little bit about the pressures of the modern-day footballer. But first, I mean, anything in that you just saw that makes you wince, makes you think, I'm not quite happy with anything to do with that? Because, of course, you've been very vocal, 2 years out of the game now.
Yeah.
I bet there's bits of that you do not miss at all.
You never miss that. No. Not if it's about you anyway, and it's on you. But you don't see that as much nowadays. No. Listen, when you see Vincent Kompany literally going for the player there, that doesn't happen that much anymore.
For the better?
Listen, I didn't mind it. I came through that old school thing. So, listen, Sean Dyche does it a little bit. But for me, if a player needs it, a player needs it. Don't be wrong, there's times where I think the manager goes way out of line. And I think it's borderline, that one. I think it can be borderline. I think if you've got something to say, you can pull the player in, have a chat with him. When you start doing it in front of everybody, it kills the player a little bit, belittles him. So, listen, there's a fine balance to it. Like I said, I think sometimes players need it, but I also believe that there's times where you could just call him in the office.
Aaron talks about that kind of transition, the evolutions, if you like, Gary, and your change from player to manager and how long you've been managing in the game as well. That gear change, have you seen it in play? That phrase, the modern-day player, can be a stick to beat certain players with, can't it? But society's changed. Your approach to another human being in a stressful environment has to change, doesn't it?
I think it has to change. I think those moments are, isolated incidents, and also not out of context, but you can't see what's happened before. Exactly. You don't know the relationship the manager's got with a player. You don't know how that's come about. Yeah. But I think you definitely have to. I think some things have changed, but I think the fundamental of management is the same, regardless of how you view it. It's about dealing with people. It's about getting the best out of people, and there's different ways to do that. Some people need a little bit of harshness at times, and you have to do it in the right way, of course. And some players just need positivity, and until you get to know that player, until you understand their personality, it's hard to know how to manage them. But I think moments like that are definitely becoming less and less. But they're always still going to be in there because it's a competitive environment and everybody wants to win and everyone has a different way of trying to get it out of people.
Is it a key thing, that side of the game? Because it was deemed... probably the terminology was different a couple of decades ago, Jobi, but the mental health aspect of what a modern-day footballer is that something that you were acutely aware of that changed in your 20-year career?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think it's a combination of maybe younger coaches who haven't had that same upbringing that probably we had, and where conversations, I'll call it a conversation, even a harsh one, were pretty normal, and commonplace. And again, it's about striking that balance. One thing I have to say, perhaps, and one thing we didn't have was the camera around all the time. Now, again, Gary hit the nail on the head. In terms of context, we do not know how many times Vincent Kompany may have tried to have that conversation and maybe it went on deaf ears, and that's the breaking point for him. Was it a little bit over the top? Yeah, of course it was. But without a camera being there, nobody sees it, and you can then deal with it internally. And I think that's the issue we have now. There is an intrusion. We understand there's shows to make and people want to see what goes on behind closed doors. So I think you have to be really careful how that then comes across. Again, for me, I just feel we are not at the same level we were in terms of how we can speak to younger players. I'm sure you've experienced it. I did towards the end of my career. And you have to find ways as a coach now to connect that aren't always just a kick up the backside. There's different things that motivate, inspire players. And I think that is a challenge in modern day coaching where you can't get by on just pinning someone up against the wall, which again we've all been a part of, and hoping that they react positively to it.
And that tough side of the job, there's glitz, there's glamour, there's riches involved in professional football. Aaron.
Yeah.
You played at the very, very highest level, but you've also experienced the depths of what potentially that exacerbated as you as a person.
Yeah.
You've talked very openly, very honestly about how you've dealt with that and possibly what else is needed to help players if they find themselves in that position.
Yeah, and listen, there's so much pressure on footballers these days. It's changed so much. Not just the football aspect, like I said, the social media. And sometimes I think people forget that footballers are just normal human beings. They've got kids at home, they've got stressful family lives, they've got people dying in their families, they've got all these other things going on in their life. But if people just assume that once they go across that white line, they're fine. And some of these players are not. And I just felt, like I said, obviously I've been through it, I just feel like there's more needs to be done on that side of things for footballers. There's more needs to be put in place. There's a few clubs now who have got therapists in there and stuff. But I still think
that's a key appointment that should be in every club. Obviously, finances permitting.
I definitely think there should be someone there for players to speak to, and openly as well. I think that's one of the issues is if they're just putting someone, a therapist in the club, how many players are going to go sit in here because they're going to be like, well, if I go and see him, the manager's not going to play me. So I think there's a lot of work needs to be done, and the best way to go by it, I'm not so sure yet. There's a few things I've actually been doing myself, which I think could help players, but it's separating away from the club. But like I said, there's a lot needs to be done because these players are human, and like I said, they're dealing with a lot of stress.
Do you think there is still that stigma? And again, it's probably a generational thing, isn't it? Where that front is, if the boss asks you, how are you? I'm fine. Injured, I'm fine. Everything all right? I'm fine. Because you want to play. There's still that stigma. Of if I admit to this one thing, that's a chink in my armour further down the line.
No, 100%. There's still a huge stigma. And I spoke about it. Players, managers used to ask me all the time, how are you? I'm fine. How's the legs? How's the legs? That was it.
Vague
that was
questions,
it. Yeah. It's how the legs. Yeah, how the legs. A bit heavy. Go get a massage.
Yeah.
That was it. There's never how's the head.
Yeah.
How are you feeling? How's things at home? And these are the things I think we need to implement. Like you said, it needs to be done because at the end of the day, these players are your assets. They need to be looked after, not just physically but mentally. And listen, it's getting better. It's getting better, but there's a lot of work to be done.
That's a big thing. It's that wraparound duty of care. Assets, yes. Commodities, yes. Human beings, though, Gary.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we're talking about it now, that there's so many more conversations and there's so much more open, whereas, you go back 10 years, no one wanted to say it. It felt like a weakness. But now, everyone's a little bit more aware. The PFA, the LMA are working very, very hard to support players. I always used to think as a manager, one of my big things was some things are more important than football. If a player ever came to see me, and you read about it where a manager will stop a player going to a funeral, a family funeral, and I just used to say, listen, that's the most important thing. Go and deal with it, and if we can help you in any way, I still don't think players want to talk enough because, like you say, they think it will affect their place in the team or the way someone will think about them. But I definitely think we're making the right steps. Yeah.
And the key thing, different organisations, the governing bodies, the FA as well, Jobi.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got a keen eye on what that work is and what it needs to be done.
Yeah, for sure. I think going back to Aaron's point about where that help comes from or that conversation comes from, again, I go back to my time at Watford, and Aidy Boothroyd, to be fair to him, was probably ahead of the curve.
Very good
in terms of getting a psychologist in. But we probably felt, I certainly did, if I went and spoke to him, that, and as well as the confidentiality that should be there, is that going to be a conversation that gets relayed between them? Or, so that was an issue for me. So I think having an independent person to speak to is really important, where the PFA might come in, like you say, the FA making sure that people are there to provide that service, because it does help. We could speak to people all the time. I wasn't necessarily a player who felt like that would help me, but absolutely there are players that conversation's absolutely huge, and normalising that is acceptable to help go and then get your performance on the pitch, which is what ultimately everyone judges you on.